different cultures. Africa, in the jungle, the women don't have clothes. Here, that would be immoral for us. How do you decipher between different cultures?
Okay.
What would be the bottom line? Give me top 5 of, okay, don't kill your babies, okay, don't steal. How do we, are there ones that are it's their culture and that's how they do things? And
there's something that is objectively right or wrong, and there are other things that we might call convention. For example, objectively right or wrong, as you mentioned, don't kill your baby. Convention is whether you drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, right? The Brits drive on the left, we drive on the right. But if the convention in Britain is to drive on the left, then you have a moral obligation to do so, because if you don't, you're going to kill yourself or others. So while the convention may be relative, the obeying the convention is objective because it's there for the preservation of life. There are some cultures which say that you, when you greet somebody, you ought to shake their hands. Others say you ought to kiss them. Others say you ought to bow to them. All that is relative to the culture. What isn't relative is that when you meet somebody, you ought to greet them, right? So the expression of how you greet may be relative to the culture, but not that you greet or show respect to somebody you meet. That's not relative, that's objective. Clothing is relative to the culture. In Iran, they're dressed head to toe, the women are. I've been there. Now that's more religious, but they think it's immoral for a woman to show more than their face, sometimes even their face. Okay? Now they may have different standards for what the dress code is, but we all agree that there has to be some form of dress. Right? We may have different standards, but we all agree that whatever the cultural standard is there, we ought to obey it. Yes, ma'am.
As Islam mushrooms in America, how are they going to legislate morality?
Oh, that's a good question. Islam, first of all, most Muslims would be pro-life. So, I mean, there are some positive things to Islam in terms of their growth. But the difference with Islam is the only real worldview that believes in the separation of church and state in the proper manner is Christianity. In other words, at least in our country, we believe that we ought not try to force people into a particular religious viewpoint. God can't force us to believe. You can't force a free being to believe anyway, right? So we're not going to try and force other people to believe. But Islam is more of a geopolitical movement. If Islam ever takes over, the same liberal college professors in our colleges today who are so politically correct that they actually affirm Islam, those people will probably be the first people to have their heads chopped off when the Muslims show up, the radical Muslims now, who want to impose Sharia law on our country. Sharia law means, first of all, just like it is in Iran. If you go to Iran today, which, as I say, I've been to, there's no alcohol in the country anywhere. There are capital crimes for much less than murder. Women are completely subjugated. Homosexuals will be executed. I mean, it is very, very hardline law. When that happens, Christians may even be executed or put under a tax, or we'll have to pay a special tax just to have the protection of Islam. You know what Islam means technically? Submission. And they say Islam means peace. Yeah, it means peace if you submit to Islam. Yeah, you'll live in peace if you submit and do everything I say. So yeah, you need to. I fear more the radical Muslims taking over than I do the secularists. I mean, I don't want either, but I'd rather have the secularists than the radical Muslims. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, now that the Supreme Court has usurped its authority from the legislative branch, how do you correct that?
Well, the way you correct it are some of the ideas we listed up here before. One of the reasons the Supreme Court is so radical is because, as I mentioned before, the church got out of education. The church got out of all these venues. We gave education to the humanists, John Dewey and company, who in 1933, he wrote a book called A Common Faith. What's the common faith? Secularism or humanism. And they taught that to the college kids. The Supreme Court is an effect of the church. In other words, we allowed it to happen. Religion wasn't taken out of public life by a Supreme Court. A Supreme Court was put in that took religion out of public life. We put them in because we got out of education and out of the culture. So what can we do about it now? Well, in our present state, all those things I listed there, we really need to put pressure on our elected representatives to choose the right justices. We can also, if you really want to go for it, the best way to hold judges accountable is to impeach them. There is something in our Constitution that allows that. Now, it's hardly ever been done because people are too scared. They don't have courage. Now, who knows this new Judge Sotomayor, this new nominee, where she stands? No one really knows where she stands. She said some stupid things in her past. She's certainly not the most qualified jurist out there. I will say this, I had my disagreements with the Bush administration on a lot of things, but not on his judge picks. John Roberts is brilliant, and so is Sam Alito. I don't know if you remember John Roberts' confirmation hearings, but he got a question from one of the liberal senators that went like this. So, Mr. Roberts, are you going to be for the little guy? And Roberts started to answer, and he said, before I do, let me say this. One wants to say he's going to be for the little guy. But then when one thinks about it, one says that when the Constitution, in a particular case, sides for the little guy, I'll be for the little guy. But when the Constitution sides against the little guy, I'll be against the little guy. Because that's what the law says. I'm here to apply the law, not to make the law. Those are the kind of people we need on the court. Those are the kind of people who respect the form of government we have. That jurists don't make laws, jurists simply apply them.